so much, Catalina, for a lovely introduction. I'm so excited to be here today, primarily because of these three lovely ladies beside me. I do think it's really important when we talk about college affordability to understand the perspective of students and what it's like to go through college and think about the costs of education. But first, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Naomi Harris. I'm a higher education reporter with a new nonprofit news outlet called Open Campus. I focus primarily on race, inequality, and access in higher education, so this is my bread and butter. And I'm really excited to be speaking to these lovely ladies, and I would allow them to introduce themselves.
Good morning. My name is Morgan Forbes. I am a junior Achieve Atlanta Scholar at Spelman College.
Greetings, everyone. I am Zanani Johnson, representing the Florida College Access Network, and I am actually a recent graduate with my master's in public administration from Florida State University. Go Noles.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Kayla Pouncey, and I am a soon-to-be graduate of the University of Alabama. Roll Tide.
Okay, so this panel obviously is about college affordability and what it's like for students when thinking about the costs of college. Part of it, we do want to talk a little bit about Pell Grants, obviously, but I also really want to get into what the financial aid process was like for students. So starting off, do you mind kind of talking to me about what you thought about college costs, how you described your thought process when thinking about the cost of college, and who you turned to when thinking about it?
So when I first started thinking about the cost of college, seeing such a big number was a bit overwhelming, but I really leaned on the College and Career Readiness Center at North Atlanta High School to help me look for different scholarships that I could apply for, and I actually ended up finding the Achieve Atlanta Scholarship, which I'm really happy that I got, and many other scholarships, which helped a lot. So my biggest factor when looking at the cost, I knew that I would have to apply to scholarships in order to cover such a high number. So I'm really happy that scholarships are out there in order to ease the cost and to allow us to have other options than taking out loans, which I've been able to do so far.
For me, college was always, in a sense, an expectation for my family. Yesterday, I shared with you, Naomi, about my grandmother having a 5th grade education. She's 103 now, you all, but she instilled, thank you. She instilled in my parents the importance of college and how it really, truly was the greatest equalizer. So from birth, after my parents graduated from Florida A&M University, they started preparing for my sister and I to attend school. So they actually helped us have a Florida prepaid, which allowed them to save over time for our college journey. But my parents, that was not enough for them. They also told us that we need to make sure we did what we need to do in school and outside the classroom. I remember my mother taking my sister and I to convocations because they have these pamphlets where it shows you the scholarships. She's like, you need to come on, we need to grab these agendas because we need to make sure that you can apply to school, because my parents, even though they were able to go to school on a full ride, they took out loans to be able to help pay for their parents. So my family understood how loans can really be a barrier when you're trying to continue to matriculate through life. So they wanted to make sure my sister and I were prepared and didn't have to experience that. So my college journey, the financial aid process, everything truly was a village, because the information my family didn't know, they were able to ask their friends who had children who went through college. So that's how I understood college affordability. Take out what you need. Let's try to go for no loans. I did end up taking out a loan for my master's program, but thanks to Joe Biden, it's gone. So
I know that's right.
So that was my college affordability. I think that it really does take a village, and sometimes if some students don't have that, that's why these networks are important, so that they can have that support and understanding.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so similar to Zanani, I also grew up in a home where education was definitely encouraged from a very young age. I grew up with a great grandmother that was an educator, and so, as I was saying, from a very young age, education was something that was instilled in me very early. That was one of my biggest priorities. My mom always encouraged me to do my best because that was going to be the key to success. And I always knew I wanted to go to college. I was one of those kids where in middle school I was planning like vision boards of what my college life was gonna be like. Of course, it looks a lot different now. But as I got older, you know, and started getting into high school and started looking at the more realistic factors that involved higher education, seeing those big numbers, kind of like Morgan was saying, was definitely very off-putting and very discouraging. And so I feel like maybe a lot of students can relate that as they get closer and closer to what they really want to do, their goals start to diminish because they start to see what it takes. And so I feel like something that was very important for me when I was thinking about my experience or what it would take for me to attend was that myth of a college fund. Like, I grew up in an environment where the support was, it needed to be collective. Kind of, you know, from a lower socioeconomic background, we were living paycheck to paycheck, and I knew better than to bring up the idea of whether my mother had a college fund saved for me, because I grew up in a single parent household, and my mother is also disabled. So that was something she encouraged in me, like, do your best at school, make sure that you're accessing those scholarships, but also what a lot of people don't talk about is you don't really get prepared for filling out those scholarships. They don't tell you the things that those scholarships ask, like if you have to write essays, if you need to access your transcript, if you need to submit financial documents. And that was another big thing when I was submitting the FAFSA. I'm a first generation college student, so I never really had anybody there to tell me, like, you need to fill out the FAFSA, here's what it's gonna take. And I don't know if any of y'all have really ever, like, looked at a FAFSA, but I'm over here trying not to commit tax fraud, and I'm 17 years old. So that's one of those big hurdles that a lot of people don't tell you about unless you have one of those, a college advisor maybe at your high school, but a lot of high schools don't have access to college advisors these days. And so I talked about it a lot with my mom, and my mom was very upfront, like, you need to lock in because I'm not gonna have it. Especially if you go to college out of state. And I definitely wasn't talking about it with my friends because of that aspect of shame. In high school, I was accessing private education, and so I was always on the lower financial spectrum of my peers. And so I was looking at all the things my peers had, all the struggles that they had, and it was one of those things where it was like, I didn't feel, at the time, comfortable expressing to them, like, these are some things I'm struggling with. What are some things you guys are doing to pay for college? Because I was so almost embarrassed that I wasn't as carefree as they were about what they had coming next.
Right. Yeah, no, that's really interesting because I think, you know, within my own experience about college and also hearing from all of you too, like, that was the ideal, right? You're in a household in which you know, like, education is key, it's important for you. But then the practical steps to getting to it and to pay for college is not as talked about or understood, just because, again, it's just like that dream of having a college education and being able to access more mobility, especially when you're thinking about wealth and racial wealth gaps, right? But I also, what I hear from all three of you too, is that you have to be super resourceful and understand, like, leaning on, you know, organizations like Achieve Atlanta, leaning on your family, or honestly, leaning on yourself too in those hard moments where you're like, I need to be able to pull through. But like, you guys were all talking a little bit about just the process of financial aid, and I also heard there are moments that are overwhelming. So I was just curious if we can kind of dive into that too. What would you say tended to be like an overwhelming part of the financial aid process, or things that actually just straight up confused you?
So when I was applying for FAFSA, the date, it always opens the same date, but somehow, like, I'm always busy or something that day and I miss it. But it's really important to apply for the FAFSA the day that it opens so that you're able to get as much aid as possible. And that's something that I struggle with each year, just making sure that I have it on my calendar and I'm able to meet up with my mom and we do it together and just knock it out, because you have to apply a student application and a parent application. So it's really important that you do both of those together. But something that confused me as I've been going throughout my college duration, because I'm a junior, but my mom actually recently got married while I'm in college. So this actually changed my estimated family contribution and moved me from being Pell eligible to non-Pell eligible. And this was really confusing because a lot of scholarships are tied to whether or not you are Pell eligible or not Pell eligible. So this put me at risk of losing all of the scholarships that I had already earned and worked hard for because of a new financial status that is on numbers but doesn't really affect how much money my family is willing to put towards my college education. Right. So that was a bit confusing, but as always, scholarships always pulled through, so.
For me, as I mentioned earlier about the Florida prepaid, that was something that my family and I had for us. But what ended up happening was, it's other costs besides just tuition that's our part of college. So my parents could help me with the Florida prepaid, but when it came to living there, like, hey girl, you need to get a job. So I did federal work study. But what ended up happening was all my private scholarships came in, and they kept reporting it to the school, so my work study hours got cut to the point it was like 5 hours a week at minimum wage. That wasn't doing much for me. So what ended up happening was I had to get a job off campus and things of that nature. Unexpected unemployment things happened with my family, so I found myself working 2 or 3 jobs in college, trying to maintain grades high enough to be able to keep the small amount of money my school gave me. We could talk about those ACT scores a little later. But that was my financial aid experience. Not only that, but for graduate school, I ended up having to do a loan for the summer when I was in a transitionary period. But the only thing that I could say was confusing about that was the unsubsidized, subsidized. When do I have to pay my loans back? What do you mean by this interest? I thank God I took out loans during the pandemic because no interest accumulated. But not only that, I also wasn't aware that when you go below halftime, you weren't able to get like financial aid. So I had to come out of pocket like $1,500 for my graduate class in order to graduate on time this summer. So those were some of the things I wish I had a little bit more knowledge about. And then maybe as people start doing scholarships, trying to find out how students are able to get that money, maybe for themselves, so that it doesn't always have to impact my financial aid package as a whole.
Right.
Yeah, so I think with that, the biggest struggle that I had was just having access to basic financial literacy. This is something that a lot of adults tell me all the time. Like yesterday, very embarrassing, but I had to Google how to fill out a money order. The thing is that we don't really get access to financial training in K through 12 education. So all of these things that people expect you to know about taxes, interest, all of those different types of loans, I never got that education. And so luckily I had a really great math teacher who was willing to sit down and talk with me about it. But that wasn't something that we had. And so you would think with the majority of people needing to access financial aid to go to college, that would be something that we learned. But getting into the FAFSA, all of those documents, what they meant were very confusing. It was an extra hurdle that I had to go out of my way to learn about all of these things. And again, my parents couldn't help me because they didn't know. And they didn't have a roadmap for me. They didn't have guidance. They weren't able to tell me what to do because they were figuring out just as I was. And so I had to really sit down and learn the difference between a subsidized loan and an unsubsidized loan. And that threw me for the longest time. Even now, the concept of having interest on my loans is scary, and I'm glad I took out my loans during the pandemic as well, because I feel like the flexibility that we've gotten during the pandemic has definitely offered a little bit of grace, but that's not the case anymore. We kind of move into a post-pandemic society. And so I think for me, that was my biggest struggle, accessing those loans, even kind of figuring out what my standardized test scores meant in terms of what I would be receiving for financial aid, because a lot of universities don't really make that clear either. At the University of Alabama, they're really good about merit scholarships, where they'll tell you if you make X on SAT or ACT, then you will get a minimum of X amount of money, but a lot of universities don't do that either, which is one of the biggest reasons why I chose Bama. The money is great. But yeah, that was one of my biggest struggles, for sure.
Right, right. Yeah, no, it's so interesting to hear all talk about this because it really does come down to like a lack of knowledge or not even knowing where to go when it comes to dealing with financial aid and who to turn to talk about this, because it is very like practical. Like you're talking about like, you know, student loan interest and things like that, where you're like, who am I supposed to turn to for this? Especially if you are right out of high school or about to be right out of high school. You're pretty young, you're thinking about college and the opportunity of what you can kind of achieve once you graduate. But then at the same time, you're burdened with so much information that can become overwhelming. So one of the other questions that I had for you is, when you're thinking about your financial aid packages, what do you wish you knew more about before accepting?
I can start. So kind of going back to some of those test scores, I wish that I had been prepped for how important my standardized test score would be. I feel as though I could have maybe gone back and scored better to receive more money. But something that was interesting for me in my case, and I know this is I know a lot of universities are starting to move away from standardized tests being such a big stress on their application process. But I ended up taking the SAT. I never took the ACT. What a lot of people didn't tell me though was that my university specifically, and other universities too I'm sure, prioritize the ACT and will give you more money for that standardized test if you end up scoring well. And so I felt as if I had kind of defeated myself because I didn't even take the ACT. And I was like, man, if I would have taken that, I could have had access to more funds. But there was also nobody there even to really explain the difference between the tests. Like, everybody I talked to about it was just kind of like, oh, they're the same. Like, most universities will accept both, but they don't really tell you about those nuances in each test. I also wish that I had gone to my financial aid office more and just kind of talked a little bit more about my personal situation. But a really interesting thing about that is with low-income students and kind of accessing their financial aid offices, we get put in a really unique position where if we're not automatically offered enough funds and we have to go access that extra help, we often have to release or tell them all of this really sensitive information about our lives that can sometimes include potential traumatic incidents or even situations. And it's almost as if they are measuring whether or not we're worthy of being invested in based off of how hard our past has been. Is your past difficult enough for me to invest in your future? And so that was something I wish that I had been more cognizant of before, just being prepared to do that so often, because even being about to graduate in the spring, that's a conversation that I have to have with somebody almost new every single year. I have to express my situation, the things that are putting me in financial insecurity, and might even go deeper than my education. So.
And I also just want to piggyback off of that, like how you can put yourself in a vulnerable situation and there's still a possibility that the financial aid office could say, oh, we have no more funds, the funds are already distributed, and then you feel like you've done everything that you know to do, so you're just feeling really frustrated, and that's not a good feeling to feel about school. Like, you're supposed to be excited, you're getting your education, you're about to start your career, you're learning about all the things you've been wishing about, thinking, oh, but first let me go to the financial aid office, first let me do this. And I think that it just adds another barrier that really makes college seem like only the strong survive type of thing. Like, you can't just go through college if you don't really, really want to be there.
Yeah. I think for me, something that I wish I knew was how much money truly was out there, because there is a lot of opportunities for you to get school paid for outside of loans. I also saw that my freshman year going into college, I had so many scholarships. But as my sophomore year came, my junior, my senior, even with my graduate degree, those opportunities just kind of like decreased over time, because people are always like, I want to do scholarships for graduated seniors, but it's like, hey, I'm a junior, can you have a let's get through the finish line scholarship for me? That would be very beneficial.
Yeah.
But also, What I do now is I tell all my friends that convocation trick that my mama figured out. Oh, we tell everybody go to the convocations, grab those agendas, grab the programs, because what you want to do is start early, start as early as you can. Knowing about your local college access networks, that's something I wish I would have known. I was at a school where everybody got free lunch, so that means we're typically disproportionately impacted by a lot of things. We don't have the type of money available for us, so when it comes to those opportunities, that's something I need to know more about. But not only that, in graduate school, I became an expert about finding money. My mama said once a month on Fridays, you need to turn off your phone and go look for scholarships. So when it came to my graduate degree, I applied for a fellowship through the state of Florida. They paid for your whole tuition. So what did I do? I took the max amount of classes I could, moved in with my parents. Yep, I moved back in with my parents. And I just went to school for free for a whole year. And that's what I want more students to know. It's like, I know that everybody doesn't have the same opportunities that we may have. But if I can share my knowledge, if I can go back to my access network and say, hey, these are the scholarships I was able to apply for, this is the funding available, this is how you do it, I think it'll help a lot more students. So bringing those resources straight to their communities. So that's why I volunteer at my high school now.
If I could just piggyback, yeah. I was gonna say, if I could just piggyback off Zanani's point, starting early was very critical in the journey to higher education for me. Like, kind of like I was saying before, I always knew I wanted to go to college, and that was what I envisioned my future being like. So I had kind of the opportunity to start early. But, and that's usually the advice that we get, you know, start early, make sure you're being able to dedicate that time to scholarships, applications, essays, whatever you need. But I think that what a lot of people fail to realize is that this starting early requires a point of clarity that a lot of people don't always have the luxury of exploring. I'll say if your survival is based on a day-to-day mentality, like, how am I gonna get through tomorrow? How am I gonna get through this week? How am I gonna get through this month? Nobody's thinking, okay, I'm about to graduate in the spring. I should probably think about college applications. Or kind of like Morgan was saying, that deadline for or not the deadline rather, but the application opens on the 1st. If that's not something that's in your head the October before you get ready to go to school, you're not getting that funding. And so I think that's what a lot of people fail to realize when it comes to being able to access and do that research and kind of dedicate that time, especially if you're a student that needs to work to support your household with your guardians, your family, then the luxury of having the time to be able to research all of these things, to be able to write these essays for scholarships, to be able to do whatever you need to do, is the margin is getting slimmer, if that makes sense.
And just to piggyback off of you, what I'm hearing is how can we change the financial aid process from helping students survive college, but change it to helping students thrive through college. And so once we're able to get to that point, I think we're gonna see a lot more academic success for our students.
Definitely.
For sure.
Right. Yeah. No, I completely agree. I've talked to many different students across the country for some of the work that I've been doing. And the number one thing is that it's not that they're not academically prepared to be in the classroom. They're distracted by whether or not they have food at home, what their housing situation looks like, how they're taking care of their siblings, their parents. There are so many other things that are happening for a student the second they walk into a college classroom that's beyond, oh, what's on the syllabus? What am I working on right now, right? And then you add on, like you were all talking about, like that almost like mental health burden of being like, I have to consistently explain my situation to you, and it ties to the value of whether or not I can continue to go to school because it's connected to my financial aid and it's connected to my situation. So I do agree with you, Zanani. It is about allowing students to thrive. And again, imagine what would happen if those barriers weren't there. You know, what would happen for those students if they could just comfortably go to class and not have to think constantly about going to their financial aid office and being like, oh God, here we go. I'm about to have like a 2-hour conversation only for it to maybe not turn out the way I need it to. So thank you all, honestly, for just being so honest and open about these experiences, because I do think it's really important for everyone in here to hear what it's like to be a student, to be a Black woman, to be in these spaces, and what it means for you to pursue and persist through college. So, you know, we talked a little bit about all these like access points, right? Whether it's not having the leaning on the financial wealth of your family to pay for college, whether it's not having the school counselors, whether it's being able to try and figure out what's going on with financial aid, things like that. And obviously, as we've seen this past summer with the student loan forgiveness and other initiatives that are focused on higher education, there is so much that high schools, colleges, and legislators can be doing. So for you, what would you like to see happen in order to allow students to thrive and to not find the cost of college to be as overwhelming?
I definitely, well, as a political science major, I definitely believe that there could be adjustments to our national budget and more money could be distributed to not only HBCUs, but like colleges all across the country so that colleges are able to give a better education, because I'm sure the colleges want to be able to give more scholarship money to students, but I know that their hands are tied. So I would also like to see more information being given out by the colleges about different scholarships. So not just them saying we don't have any scholarships or we're out of money, but offering an office that has scholarships that you can apply to 24/7. They'll read your letters, they'll help you throughout the whole process and not just say this is all we have, sorry, but actually say, well, we don't have any more money, but we can help you get some, something like that.
Well, for the past, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, I have been a strong advocate of ending food and housing insecurity on our college campus. Basic needs insecurity on college campuses needs to end. I want to see more funding for food pantries on campus, not just for students to get non-perishable food items, but for them to also be able to get hot meals from their cafeteria. I want to see more funding put into helping students who find themselves in emergency situations, because there are students who go to class and then sleep in their cars. I want to see schools finding more replicated models so that they can implement these programs. But it's not enough, because once they're implemented, they still need funding. I want to see schools put in their line item budget money to go towards their food pantries, these housing programs, these emergency programs, so that it's just not dependent upon outside funding. It needs to be a collective effort from universities in our communities, our business community, everybody, to help get these students who are going to be tax-paying citizens who are in school to give back to their community the opportunity to thrive through college. I'm just passionate about it because my freshman year of college, my close friend broke down after one of our student government meetings. And we're like, what's wrong? He says, my car broke down. I said, well, we got the trolley, you'll be okay. Like, what do you need? He said, no, you don't understand, that's my home. He is literally going to class by day, sleeping in his car by night, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that he had 2 other students sleeping in the car with him. So you have 3 displaced students who are in college and then sleeping in the car together. That has to stop. And so what we've done at the Florida College Access Network, I'm telling y'all, my mouth has been all through the state of Florida talking about food and housing insecurity. Because when you see students trying, like, you just have to do something. So it's not enough to just I don't want to just keep talking about it. We need to see money put behind it. And that's why I think COVID, when we had those higher education relief funding, those dollars, that's helpful. It's no reason we can't continue to do that. It's no reason we can't continue to do that. And then, and this is my last thing, because I could go for hours. I'm so happy my student loan debt has been cleared for me, but what's going to stop them from having to do this in 10 or 15 years? We have to figure out how to continue to assist students with this student loan, college affordability, and that's why I'm thanking all of you all here, because this conference and the work y'all are doing every day are helping students like me. Yes, I brought my stole. graduate. So I want to see student loan debt forgiveness. I want to see higher education relief funding, everything they were able to do through the pandemic to help us get through school. I want to continue to see that.
Continue. That part. Yeah, full stop. So, as Zanani and Morgan, I have to agree, it's going to start with the policy. I think that, honestly, we need to pour more money into the Pell Grant. My sophomore year, yeah, shout out Alabama Possible. I myself am a Pell Grant recipient. My EFC is 0. I am extremely, extremely grateful for the Pell Grant. I would not be here in front of y'all today without it. I would not have even made it this far in college without it. My chances at college would have been null and void if it weren't for that. And so I really want more people to understand how many people are in my situation and reliant on that grant and that federal aid to go to school. And so my student story was one of many that helped increase the Pell Grant for the 22-23 school year, and I am taking it in.
Yeah.
I'm taking it in. But increasing federal funding is a start. I think that it will also help with student loan debt relief. That is going to definitely be one of the biggest priorities, especially after a lot of these restrictions have been lifted. A lot of my student loan debt is going to be cleared, but it's not going to be everything. And I'm a pre-law student, and so my mom is kind of in a place where she's like, I can help you with that first degree, but that second one, that's on you. So that's kind of where I'm at. I feel like a lot of people it's very easy to have their potentials limited due to the lack of funding. I'm one of those people where it's like, this is what I want to do. I want to be an attorney. I'm going to be an attorney. I'm going to excel at school, but I don't even have the opportunity to showcase my ability to do that unless I get funding. Another thing that I feel like we really need are people that work in financial offices, specifically financial aid offices on universities, campuses, that are not only well educated about, or not only financially literate, but people who are prepared to deal with these burdens. Because kind of like I was saying earlier, there's been plenty of times where I've walked into the financial aid office spilling my whole entire personal business, my whole life, everything that's bothering me, like current situations even, some that even pop up in the middle of the semester, like Zanani was saying. And I just get this blank look that's like, well, we don't have any more funding, I'm sorry. And it's like, what more can I do? That's another thing. But I feel like one of the biggest things that we all should help be doing, in addition with administrators, we need to reset our standards of academia, because as we progress, having that 4.0 is not enough anymore for a lot of universities. You can have a 4.0, but they also expect you to cure cancer at this rate. And so those standards can be very, they can limit a lot of people, because kind of like I was saying earlier, I might be working extremely hard to have a 4.0 in school, but if I have to go to work after school, I'm not going to be able to be the president of a club. I'm not going to be able to play sports. I'm not going to be able to get that scholarship that's sending me to college, because I have to do for my survival. Or I might not have a 4.0, but I might be extremely involved everywhere else, and that's still not good enough. People are no longer seeing students for individuals. They're seeing us as statistics and what can get their college admissions rates up, their reputation up. And that's really unfair for students like me. Like Zanani was saying, everybody hasn't had the opportunities or the resources that I've had. So I feel like my story is exceptional. I feel extremely blessed to even be in this position, but I'm thinking about everybody that hasn't. Resetting those standards of what academia looks like, what it means to be intelligent, what it means to be a scholar. Those are things that are gonna not only push our students who are in college right now further, but it's also going to help kind of take the weight off of shoulders of students who are feeling discouraged that they're not good enough for college.
And I also want to see like more businesses, alumni, everybody just understanding that this generation is like, I know that you guys probably had it hard as college students and it was difficult for you guys as well, but with social media, so much going on in the world, schools comparing you, social media, everybody's just comparing everything. I feel like it's really hard for this generation to focus on school. So having a financial barrier as well is just really, it's so hard to just push through and keep focusing on everything that you're passionate about, because nobody's passionate about, well, actually you guys are, but the students right now aren't really passionate about figuring out how they're going to pay for school. They're passionate about their majors, their classes, what they're learning, their clubs. That's what really gets our fire going. So I thank you guys for being here and doing the work that you do and meeting us halfway so that we can still enjoy what we have going on, but also lean on you guys and all of the work that you guys do so that we're able to do even more.
Amen. Yeah, no, this is one of like the most exciting things about my job as a reporter, is to honestly just sit back and hear from students about their own experiences, because there is so much like nuance that can go missing if you don't just take the time to hear them and to listen to their stories. And I do appreciate all three of you for being so honest and open and vulnerable about your stories, because when you're thinking about the costs of college, oftentimes shame comes along with costs and whether or not you can afford something. And so I do think it is important to like push past that barrier and start to have honest conversations with one another about what helps you and what's in your way of being the best version of yourself, right? And how to get there. So I wanted to turn to you all. If you have any questions, we'd love to open it up. There are 4 mics, I believe, across the room, or yes. I think someone from NCAN might be walking over, if a mic or something. Ooh, those lights are bright.
Hi. Oh, hello. Okay. Hi. My name is Gabriella Diaz. I've loved everything you ladies have said today. I was really relating as a recent college grad from Hunter College in New York City. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I guess my thought and question is, we know the things that have to change about financial aid, FAFSA, and the ways that students can be better served in order to make their lives easier when it comes to receiving that financial aid. Now, we know also that there are certain obstacles that exist, and they exist there for a reason, even though those, like, obviously we might not agree with them, but they exist there for a reason, such as the military-industrial complex. So how do we, as educators in this room, navigate, sort of like curve those obstacles so we can still help our students get to their success, so that they don't have to resort to settling for a lot of obstacles that exist, and so they can truly chase their dreams and know that they can get to where they want to be, and feel supported through all of us. I'm sorry, that was very long, but I hope I got to the point.
Yeah, so your question touches me, and the reason why is because growing up with such a large influence from an educator, encouraging students is one of the biggest things you can do to help. Letting them know that they are fit to access college education. It's for them. There's nobody saying that, well, besides, all of the hurdles that we just mentioned, there's nobody telling you that you don't belong there. You deserve education just as much as everybody else. It doesn't matter where you come from, how much money you have, anything of that nature. I think just kind of making that reality open for them, saying, here are the avenues that you personally can take to access college. Even though it might not look like everybody else, that doesn't mean that the option is eliminated for you. I really think getting to know the students you're working with is one of the key ways to help them, because they become more willing to share personal information with you. They become more open with you, more willing to share those personal things about themselves that may be hurdles in their access to education. And they'll feel comfortable doing that, and they'll trust you. And I think that was one of the things that I was lacking the most as I got closer and closer to my college applications. It was kind of me lacking those mentors there saying, hey, this is something that you can do. And like I said before, I feel really lucky because that was an inherent passion I had. But I feel like if that wasn't something that had touched me, I would not have even explored that option because of all of the other hurdles that existed. Especially being, and I think this is kind of a unique perspective, coming from a private institution, there's always a lot of focus on students that naturally shine. And you're supposed to celebrate them, but a lot of the students that struggle or have to prioritize survival over their education often get overlooked all the time. And they don't even have the chance to even think about college. They just think of it as something people do and not like a life that they could have. So TLDR, support your students, definitely get to know them, know their needs, specialize them.
Yes, I definitely agree. And I also think knowing your students can go even further because college might not be for everybody. And I think we put a lot of focus on the 4-year college, and for some people, technical school might work better, or going to trade school or community college while you save up to go and finish at a 4-year university are all different options that should be discussed with students. And I feel like every student should not be put into a cookie cutter, but honestly evaluated and given the opportunity to think through what they're about to do for the next 4 years and actually make sure it's the best decision for them financially, mentally, spiritually, everything.
And also, because I really want to make sure we have time for the next question too. Yesterday I was talking to a young man. His name is Mr. Moody. That's his last name. Okay, I think you're out there. But he said okay, he's waving his hand. You all, he is amazing. He said he stays in contact with his students even after he gets them into college. That is sometimes better than money. Because you can have all the financial aid in the world, but if you don't have that support, somebody staying in contact with you saying you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, it can get hard. So just staying in contact with your students, because everybody don't have the money part. Like everybody can't give a student money every month, but just that encouragement text and him visiting his students, that goes a long way.
Right. We'll switch sides real quick.
Hi, Aloysia from Peer Forward. At our organization, we have a number of mottos, but one of them is "A peer got me here." So I'm wondering, when it came to navigating financial aid and paying for college, were there any peer networks that you tapped into that you found particularly helpful? And in what ways did they help you navigate that situation?
Well, I know for me, I get a lot of the scholarships that I find off of the UNCF website, and they just have like them all listed, and you can go and look through and see which one fits for you if you're eligible. So that I look on there about every day. But I haven't really come into contact with peer groups, so I'll definitely look into yours. But
the first thing that comes to my mind is the D9 network. I'm a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And so one of the things that we offer are scholarships for students who are entering college. So what we did was I was able to also, when I was a senior, I was able to get the Delta Scholarship, the Zeta Scholarship, the AKA Scholarship, the Alpha Scholarship, the 100 Black Men Scholarship. I mean, we were filling out everything, but those are the first networks that we started in, those networks that are designed to help people matriculate through education and have that support system. And then from there, like I told y'all, my mama with the convocations. Please tell your students to go to those convocations and get the programs. It's so much information in them. And then I also asked my friends. That's how I found out about the fellowship that actually helped me pay for my graduate degree. They did the program. They told me about the program. And now I happily tell everybody else about the Gubernatorial Fellows Scholarship out there.
So before I accessed college or higher education, I had no idea even about peer networks. That's how in the dark I was. But similar to Zanani, I'm also a member of an MPHC organization. I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Hey, sorors. So I was accessing them scholarships too, baby. Anything I could get, I was tapping in. Like, they helped me so much, and they help me even now. Professional development, scholarships still. So they're probably one of my biggest networks that I was accessing then and now.
Yep.
And I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, everybody. Thank you guys so much for everything that you have stated. I have a question for NCAN in regards to this panel. Will it be available for us to share with other people? Because I do want to share this in particular with my school community. Currently, I'm a college counselor in New York City. I graduated from Hunter, so hi, Hunter alum. I work with students who are currently in your situation. And this school year, I was so grateful to be here because this school year, I went in questioning whether or not people value college education anymore. And I say that because I even hear it from adults encouraging students, you don't have to go to college, you don't have to go to college. And I was just like, okay, but what else do they do? Because not everybody wants to do plumbing, carpentry, or be a mechanic. So it's just like we do have to recognize what we're saying to young people and how we're encouraging them to take hold of their future. And it's such a pleasure watching you guys today, and I just want to congratulate you on everything that you have accomplished.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, yeah, I would love to piggyback off of that just really quickly. Thank you all again for being here, for being honest, and just talking to a room full of people about your experiences and what it means if someone decides to invest in you and take a chance. Because at the beginning of the conversation, we talked a lot about how college, the value of college for you and your families, and to see you all on this stage continue to persist through college, graduate from college, I think is really important when we're thinking about when we give people a chance and an opportunity. So yeah, unless there are any other questions, thank you all so much. This has been a pleasure. I'd love to give them applause one more time.
Thank y'all.